Welcome everybody, I'm Santiago Kneeland and this is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. In today's episode, we're going to close this series that we had with Derek Grimes, the story of Urantia, how God was revealed to us, the different stages of humanity within this progression. And now we come to this final episode where we basically draw all this information. So now we're going to talk about the source where we find all this information. So 500,000 years, this planet has been part of a long spiritual story, one marked by rebellion, loss, and repeated divine intervention. Last few episodes, we explored the Planetary Prince's staff, the Lucifer Rebellion, Adam and Eve, and the preparation for humanity for the arrival of Jesus. Jesus revealed the Fatherhood of God and the Brotherhood of humanity. But history did something unexpected with that message. Over time, the teachings of Jesus slowly shifted from the life he lived to doctrines about his death. And that raised a profound question. Why was another revelation needed? In the early 20th century, a book appeared claiming to tell the full story of our planetary history, our place in the universe, and the divine presence living within each human being. If that revelation is real, then it means something extraordinary. We are not fallen, humanity has never been abandoned, and our spiritual future is far larger than we imagine. Today we explore why the fifth revelation was sent and what it means for the future of our world. So this was a long intro, and this is we haven't gone to the segment intro, but welcome, Derek. I think this is a very interesting topic, as many of the ones before.
Yeah, it's the one we've been building to, so it's good. Yeah.
So here's an interesting situation where we do not just find about the past, but see what's happening and see what's in store for us if we can, draw up some conclusions. So that's going to be a lot of fun. In this segment, we're going to see how Jesus came to reveal the Father, not to found a religion about himself. Within a generation of his life, the story began to shift. The focus moved from the message of the kingdom within to doctrines about sin, sacrifice, and salvation through the cross. How did that transformation happen? And if the original message became partially obscured, could that be one reason a new revelation was necessary? So a lot of questions, a lot of information. Please tell us, Derek, a little bit of this story.
All right. So I guess this episode is basically wrapping up everything we've been talking about. So just as a very, very quick recap, we're talking about 5 revelations of truth on our planet so far, including the one we're going to be talking about today. And we talked about the first revelation, which is the arrival of a planetary administration on the planet, which is designed to co-create civilization with humanity. And we learned how that failed, and our planet was betrayed to the Lucifer Rebellion, and everything just totally collapsed and plunged us into confusion and darkness. One of the heroes of that age, his name was Van, and he carried the light of truth onwards from when the Lucifer Rebellion broke out 200,000 years ago. He carried that all the way through 160,000 years to the arrival of Adam and Eve, who we also talked about. And Adam and Eve, they had a twofold mission. One was to try to rehabilitate the planet and pull it out of this chaos and confusion. And from there, obviously, start rebuilding and moving us forward in the same way that the first plan was to co-creatively build civilization. The other thing that they came to do was to uplift human genetics. And we talked a lot about that as well. So they came to inject divine DNA into the human gene pool. And we got a whole episode about that. So
a brief recap in history, and so for people, if this is the first time they're hearing this, so it's we understand that there's this biological progression or evolution that it gets to the point where we have this divine genetics that it starts there, or
Right.
not that it starts, but it continues there. So we see this evolution within the biological nature, the material nature, that starts to become more spiritual within human beings, right? So
Yes.
that's a lot of
Yeah.
what, and why you can see that there's a confusion why they were the first humans. Of course, I mean, if they are really, blending with us, they are really, a part of our history. We come
Yeah.
from them as well, right?
They are the mother and father of a distinct race on our planet
Yeah, yeah,
of divine beings, I guess. And that's where we get a
yeah,
lot of our mythology from, as
yeah.
we talked about and as we love to talk about.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, and that's a
Yeah,
lot of more in store for that. So keep in tune. This is not the end of these conversations. So we have
exactly.
more installed. So yeah, so
Exactly.
that's where we have, or one of the, like you said, the other mission for these material sons and daughters, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, their mission failed. They defaulted. That's in our mythology. In what we read in the Bible of them being cast out of the garden, and they actually did leave the garden and had to rebuild. Um, and basically, the race that they built up, because they ended up dying, they became mortal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it diluted over the centuries and millennia.
Yeah.
And that's kind of supposed to happen, but it's not supposed to dilute really as much as it has. So we only received a very small portion of what we're supposed to generally get.
Yeah.
Um, but also not the spirit of truth, but the light of truth
Mm-hmm.
on the planet really started fading because there was no one to guide that anymore, right? Adam and
Yeah.
Eve, there was no physical manifestation of the divine government of God on our planet anymore.
Yeah.
I
That
mean,
ended with them.
that ended with them, right? We had
Yeah.
the princes, the planetary administration before the Lucifer Rebellion. We had Van and his people all through the 160,000 years. We had Adam and Eve, and then they died, and the cord was cut, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's nobody to really keep guiding that light of truth,
Mm-hmm.
and that became a huge problem. So Adam and Eve came about 37,000 years ago, and by about 3000 BC, this light of truth had become just barely a glowing ember,
Mm-hmm.
and the divine beings who were in charge of running things, because everything had defaulted, they're called emergency sons or Melchizedeks, and that's what
Yeah.
we were talking about in another episode. Um, Melchizedek, there's 12 of them. One of them decided he better do an emergency mission, and
Yeah.
he bestowed himself physically on the planet for 90 years, and he also had a twofold mission. The first part of the plan was to reignite this light of truth,
Mm-hmm.
this truth of the universal Father.
Exactly.
Um, and the other thing was to start creating a foundation for what was coming.
Yeah.
And what was coming was Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. And they already knew that he was coming. And so they needed to set up some sort of foundation for him to work with. And so
Okay.
that's what we talked a lot about in our last episode was Jesus and the significance of his arrival and what he actually did while he was here,
Yeah.
and what it all meant and what he actually taught, which is really important as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that in our planetary history, our long planetary history, we're talking 500,000 years of history that we've been describing in this series.
Yes.
That is the real turning point for us. It dramatically shifted the trajectory towards, like we've been going way off on a trajectory of where it's supposed to really be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Jesus came and he's sort of turning us back onto getting us
Yeah.
normal again, right?
That's a good description of
Yeah,
putting it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we're not there yet. He didn't just snap his fingers and everything's perfect, and there's still a lot of work to do, and we'll be talking about that today. But what we did talk about at the end of our episode last time is that when he ascended, the Spirit of Truth was poured out upon the planet, and the Spirit of Truth is his personal spirit. So it's basically when he was here with us physically, he could only interact with us on a person-by-person basis because he was a person. But his Spirit of Truth, his spirit, can be with everyone everywhere at the same time. And that's how powerful it is. Yeah.
He liberated himself from the material body, then he can pour out his spirit. So this
exactly.
is so now we have this other spirit within us, and there's many spirits. I mean, that's another topic, but this special one, which is truth, and it's important because truth is always within us, and when something is presented, I mean, you can always discern if it's, I mean, if you're genuinely and your intentions are obviously for the good, you always differentiate truth.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Another component of who is with us all the time is a divine fragment that we've learned about.
Yeah.
And that comes directly from the Universal Father. And his being here allowed what's called the universal pouring out of the divine fragments, so that every single person on the planet now at a certain age, which is somewhere, I think now between 5 and 6 years old, has a divine fragment that indwells them. So that's like big stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
And the last thing is that the Lucifer Rebellion was finally functionally ended.
Yeah.
So those are the big things. So this episode now picks up from there, really. So
and this is very interesting because, as we were saying, and you're going to explain this, how we get to this point. We have, like you said, this emergency bestowal, and now this very important situation where with this particular planet that we live in, that has not only a couple of things that didn't work out, a lot of things that didn't work out, and put us in the situation where we have Jesus coming and kind of combining a lot of different missions into one, and kind of making a special mission to put us in the right trajectory. But although, and this is important to say, I mean, that defined the last 2,000 years, that shift. I mean, we see it. Christianity shaped the world. If it wasn't for Christianity, the world that as we know it wouldn't exist. But it wasn't the actual teachings. It wasn't that. Although it was Christianity has been a civilizing feature factor teaching, whatever you want to call it, that got civilization to this point. Now we have to. I think it's interesting, and we're going to talk about why at this moment we have to re-understand Christianity and the teachings of Jesus in itself. So
that's right.
Tell us about this, Derek.
So you're talking about teachings, and I think it's really important to really emphasize what he actually taught, and that can really be boiled down into just a couple of sentences, really. So the foundation of what he taught is that we can all have a personal relationship with the Universal Father, and because of that, we are all brothers and sisters under the Fatherhood of God. And that makes us all one family, not just a planetary family or a family of people in one religion or another religion. We're talking universal. Our whole planet, every other living sentient being in the whole of all creation, universes upon universes. We are all brothers and sisters under the Fatherhood of God.
Yeah.
And that is an incredible teaching. Like you can just dig and dig and dig and deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's just so profound.
Yeah, because I mean that relationship. I mean, it sounds very simple, and it is simple. But as you recognize your brothers, and you have that altruistic or that goodwill, and that's the famous goodwill towards men. That goodwill that you have within of doing good and of serving and of looking for the benefit of both. then you're co-creating, because we're seeing that we're co-creators. We're not just, random accidents within this fish tank that we're just being watched, but we are, you know, part of the evolution of this universe, not only planets. So
Yeah.
once we understand that interaction and we become an active part of it, then we assume, our divine role. It might sound corny or cliche, but it
No.
is,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's how it happens.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I think another couple of things that we have to emphasize is what he came to do here.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be talking about this a little bit more, but it was definitely not to become a sacrifice. And we'll
Exactly.
talk about that in a minute. But I
Yeah.
think fundamentally, and we all know this, he came to reveal the nature of the universal Father to humanity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you can see that it's such a distinct contrast between the Old Testament depiction of God and the
Yeah.
New Testament, right?
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
that exactly shows the upgrade in the understanding that we have of the nature of the universal Father because of Jesus now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
a lesser understood thing that I think he also came to do was he was also at the same time revealing man to God.
Yeah.
He was revealing us as we really are to God in a way that it's just so intimate and just
Yeah. And incarnated, he became
yeah,
one.
yeah,
He became a human. So imagine
yeah,
that. That's really profound. Once you
yeah,
analyze it and you put it in perspective, and it goes
yeah,
all the way to the Father, to the center of the universe. It's really important. Yeah.
um so let's keep that in our minds because that's actually going to become really uncomfortable in a few minutes.
Okay. Well, that's going to be good. And
Yeah,
and so
yeah,
I mean, all this build
yeah,
up, everything. So we got to this point where now we have, I mean,
yeah,
the trajectory was corrected, but then it was
yeah,
kind of skewed within that
yeah.
correction. So let's see what this is all about. What
That's
what
right. So what
happened?
happened? What happened? And believe it or not, it actually started on the day of Pentecost. And it wasn't a deliberate thing. It was just um like you can imagine what the apostles and the female apostles, who there were female apostles, how they were feeling in between the um death of Jesus and his ascension. They were going through all of these emotions and
Mm-hmm.
misunderstandings and confusion and grief and belief and unbelief and just all of this
Yeah.
crazy stuff going on. And so you can imagine when the Spirit of truth finally came and indwelt the apostles on Pentecost, and that's a thing that actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's Michael's spirit now coming to you know
Pour into
be
everybody.
pour across the earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Peter stood up and started preaching because he was just so motivated and just spiritually excited, and he got the message wrong. He changed the message. Instead of teaching what Jesus taught them to teach, he started praising the risen Lord.
Okay.
He and in some ways rightfully deified Jesus, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not the focus of what Jesus taught them to teach.
Yeah.
He was teaching them about personal relationships with God. He was talking about how if every single person has a divine fragment, then basically every relationship that you are having with somebody, you're kind of having that relationship with God too.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things that
Okay.
he was teaching people, and so we're talking another tangent again, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and it was unintentional. He was excited and
He's a human,
yeah.
and
So
all of us are. Yeah.
yeah, so it changed from what Jesus taught to who Jesus was, and that's what Christianity has kind of become. So Paul, when he came along, he added to this, right? He did a lot of good stuff. He's credited as one of the 7 outstanding teachers in all of human history. So he must have done something right. But so he carried Christianity to the Gentiles, and Christianity really is Pauline Christianity. That's what Christianity actually is. It's based on the
His
theology of
teachings.
Paul.
Yeah, his
Yes,
basis. Yeah.
right. Unfortunately, Paul's theology also included this idea of the atonement, that Jesus came here to sacrifice himself for the original sin, basically.
Yeah, this
Right?
was trying to fill in the gaps, right?
Right.
They were saying, okay, so how does Jesus fit into all of this as the Messiah and this and the story, and we have this original sin and Adam and Eve. So he's put in there without
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
necessarily being there
Yeah.
to
And
justify the story.
they're trying to answer this really difficult question for them at the time. How could a son of God die? Why would he die? What's the reason for that? And so
And you have to think
this is
of
Paul's
2,000
answer.
years ago, 2,000
Yeah,
years ago, the education,
right?
everything, the cosmology of how we understand things, you know.
Yes. And Paul, obviously, as trained as a Pharisee, um, knew a lot of Jewish not philosophy,
The
theology as well.
foundations, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And there's a lot of like sacrifice for sin and stuff like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
in
exactly.
Judaism, right? So this idea of a sacrifice for the sin of a fall that, as we've covered, especially in the Adam and Eve episode, never happened, right? So
Hmm.
as we've learned, there was no fall of man. It was the fall of Adam and Eve, who were divine beings who came here to help us. It wasn't us, it was them.
Yeah.
Um, so if there's no fall of man, there's no original sin.
Hmm.
And this whole entire atonement framework completely collapses, because the idea is that it's a sacrifice to pay for the sins of man, and sin came into the world through Adam and Eve. And
It doesn't work that way.
yeah, it's a house of cards is what it
Basically,
is, really. Yeah.
basically, yeah,
So then you come to the question, well, you know, why did Jesus die the way he died? And we talked a little bit about this already, but
yeah.
it wasn't necessary for him to die violently the way he did. What was required was for him to live a life as a normal mortal, and for him to experience the consequences that come with a life like that and the choices.
The
And
accidents within that life, the
exactly,
sometimes injustices that are not done by God, but rather human beings, and that's
that's
something
right.
that we have to understand. It wasn't
Yeah,
God; it was really the will of humans, really.
that's right. It was what it boils down to. It was a reaction of the religious leaders of the time,
Yeah,
absolutely, completely, totally rejecting him
yeah,
and his message, which is an absolute tragedy.
yeah, yeah.
So so then we talk about the resurrection. What exactly is the resurrection then? And in my mind, that's the actual revelation. Well, not but like a really fundamental part of the fourth revelation, Jesus's revelation. And that is resurrection is proof
Mm-hmm.
of the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
He died, he rose again, he was resurrected, and he made himself visible to us so that we could see that we survived death.
Exactly.
That is the fundamental thing that he was showing us by coming back after he died.
And let me make this note here, which is interesting. And before I read the Urantia book, I saw the resurrection as something physical. And what we understand, and you have to read it, or at least
Yeah,
go to the Urantia book pod, and then you can get something there. But it, his material body just dissolved. Let's say in a way,
yeah,
disappeared.
yeah,
It accelerated in time, which we're gonna think come into a little bit further. But his resurrection was in this mid stage between spirit and material, which is called
Yes.
the Morantia. This is,
Yeah.
and that's why when Mary Magdalene and all the depictions they hear in the Bible that he had this luminous glow, that is the Morantia nature. So it was
Yeah.
really, this new nature coming to us. It's interesting, and that
Yes.
makes more sense than saying, okay, there wasn't just a dead body come up, which is what
Yeah.
happened with Lazarus. Lazarus did what was,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
resurrection of a physical body. In his case,
Yeah.
it was the beginning of the Morancha phase of his life.
Yes. And that also explains why nobody immediately recognized Jesus as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
So
It gets
we've got,
interesting. So yeah.
yeah. So we got 2,000 years now since all of this happened. And because of Peter's tangent and Paul's theology and a whole
And
bunch of
history.
other and history and people working on things and thinking and just piling on piling on piling
Evolving
on.
the concept.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? But the thing is if you start piling and building on something that's already off the
The skewed.
trajectory,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the distance between them gets bigger and bigger, and so by the time we're at 2,000 years, look at how far apart we are already, right? So
And that's why everybody that just doesn't really doesn't make sense, because we now are more educated, we have more conclusions, we have the scientific world, and a lot of it doesn't make sense, and it's like, okay, why should I believe in something that doesn't? But when it clicks, and it's not about faith, when logic clicks, then faith can actually, that's the spirit of truth. That's where you say, okay, so these foundations, this basis is truth. And I understand, and that happened to me, why I shied away from the traditional Christian teachings through Catholicism into this new revelation of the real nature of Jesus. And it's
yeah,
important. So anybody that's really listening to us and has this feeling and says, it doesn't make sense, when it does make sense, and please listen to the whole story, and if you can, read a
yeah,
little bit more. I mean, it's really going to change your life, because everything falls into place, and it's really understood. All right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
let's continue with this, Derek.
And I'll just also say that in the Bible there are 4 books, canonical books, about the life and teachings of Jesus. Each one, say
Hmm.
about 70 pages each one. I think Mark is a little shorter. Um, the Urantia section that depicts the life and teachings of Jesus is 700 pages. So imagine how much more information and detail there is in there about what he actually said and did.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to imagine. Just go and check it out yourself.
Yeah.
It's
It's
absolutely
yeah.
amazing. Yeah. So now we're coming to, it's 2,000 years later. We're falling into a familiar pattern here, right? We don't
Yeah.
have this physical manifestation of the divine government here on the planet. And over the centuries and millennia, things get distorted and things get diluted. And we've already demonstrated that we're on a trajectory, right? And
Hmm.
it's going further and further off of what should have been, or
Hmm.
what at least they were hoping would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we've got this pattern again. The question that the universe administration is facing, and now I would put our timeline at about the very end of the 19th century, so the end of the 1800s.
Hmm.
They're sitting there going, well, we got to do something about this, right?
The most
And
savage of the century was about to begin, the 20th century. The most
yeah,
deaths in, yeah.
and we know that not necessarily everything's predestined, but they have a way of sort of seeing a lot further into the future a lot more clearly than we do.
Hmm.
We talked about that with
Yeah.
Melchizedek, right?
Yeah.
So they're sitting there thinking, well, how do we intervene on a planet still in quarantine? We're still quarantined because of the Lucifer Rebellion. There's no resident physical administration. And there are still 2 rebel personalities here on the planet. Most of the rebels were removed when Jesus ascended, but
Hmm.
Caligastia and his right-hand guy, Dalagastia, are still here.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we intervene? And interestingly, right at about that time, what you would call universal literacy on the planet was achieving a level where a book is probably a really good idea, because literacy rates all over the planet were skyrocketing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're in a position now where there's probably still quite a few, but it's getting less and less and less,
Yeah,
the
the,
number
the
of
the
people who
proportion
can't
is
read.
now
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
So a book, especially in the beginning of the 19th or 20th century, is probably the best answer, and that's what they decided. So we're going to start communicating, right? So they start looking around, and they start looking at different groups of people, and there were a few, and they were looking as well at this one group in Chicago, and this one particular person, his name was William Sadler. He was a doctor, right? A
Mm-hmm.
psychiatrist and doctor, and he was also, interestingly, a committed debunker of spiritualism and the
Which was
paranormal.
rampant at that time. That was
Very much
the
so. Yeah, it was
uh,
all the rage at the time. They're having seances and all that kind of stuff, and he'd go in and he'd sort of look for all the contraptions and try and debunk it all, right?
mm-hmm.
So they're thinking, well, this kind of guy is kind of ideal if we're going to start, trying to communicate with him, right? Because he's going to really try and figure this out and realize that it's the real thing. So he's
Yeah.
not someone easily fooled, right? So
Yeah.
a contact was established, and they call this guy the sleeping subject. And it's just this guy who would fall asleep.
We don't know his name. We don't know, and
No,
and the story is that this wasn't that suddenly this Sadler was called, right, and he started
he was
studying.
called. It was in his
Yeah.
building or something where he was living. And because he's a doctor, they sort of called him down and said, can you please take a look at this?
Yeah.
And so they started sort of looking at this, and um, I'm not sure if people were actually or into, I don't know what you call them, personalities, were speaking through this guy, or he was just writing. But there was communications going on, and Sadler was going back and forth and really trying to trip this up to try and find out what was going on. And finally, a message came through and said, if you really knew what you had here, you would start asking some serious questions. And that kind of changed everything. So started asking serious questions. And eventually a small group formed, and they eventually called it the Forum.
Mm-hmm.
And they would meet at Sadler's house in Chicago. And um, this sleeping subject would have written some stuff out, right? And so Sadler would present the stuff, he'd read it out or whatever, and they'd discuss it. And all of the celestial beings who were there would be listening and watching, and they would write down answers, or they would revise based on the discussion and the questions being asked. And so, like, there's this give and take process that's going on,
Okay.
and this went on from about the early 1920s all the way into the mid 1930s.
Okay.
It was a very long
A little bit
process,
more than
and
10 years, right?
it was, yeah, I would say, yeah, probably 15-ish, maybe even more, because it
Okay.
took a little while for the forum to really, like,
Yeah. Come
coalesce.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the sleeping subject, they date that back as far as 1910, 1911, maybe. So
Okay.
there's a period in between there and the forum that I think some information was coming as well, but it wasn't as formalized.
Okay.
So, but again, a lot of this it's the legend of how this
Yeah.
came to
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
really, right?
Exactly.
Um, so this is sort of how we got parts 1, 2, and 3 of what is now the Urantia book. And they came in a series of papers. There's 196 papers on different topics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cosmological, historical, scientific, you name it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so most of this was done by about the mid 1930s. And then suddenly, part 4 was materialized. It just showed up exactly like it is now. And that's because it was a gift from our midwayer cousins. And midwayers are a type of celestial being who exists between us and the angels. So they're the closest to our level of reality. And the midwayers are actually the permanent residents of our planet. The oldest midwayers have been here since pretty much the founding of the planetary administration 500,000 years ago. The youngest ones date back more to Adam and Eve. But they have been here and they will be here. They have been here for ages upon ages upon ages. They're the historians of the planet.
Okay.
They chronicle everything that's happened. They help out where they can. They do all kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're going to be here until they're released when our planet is finally settled in what's called light and life, which is basically we've become perfected.
Okay.
And then they are allowed to continue the way we do as mortals when we die, into an ascension plan, which is really cool stuff that is outside the scope of what we're talking about today.
Definitely. But yeah.
So part 4 is a gift from these midwayer cousins of ours. And what's so significant about it is exactly what I was gushing about when we were talking about Adam and Eve, because the papers that we get about Adam and Eve were written by, I'm going to get this wrong, was it a seraphim?
I don't know. I'm
No.
too many personalities.
Written by a celestial being who was actually there.
Okay.
The Adam and Eve's papers, and let that sink in. The Adam and Eve papers were written by the person who was actually there, the voice in the garden.
Yeah.
The 700-page part 4 part of the Urantia book is written by our midwayer cousins who were actually there.
Exactly.
Watching it all, chronicling it all.
Yeah, imagine
like
that.
It's eyewitness testimony.
Yeah.
That is extraordinary, and it continues, and I've said it before, it just blows me away like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
So that's basically, we've got parts 1, 2, 3, which came into being through this process, give and take with the forum, and then we've got this part 4, which is gifted to us by the midwayers, and then World War II happens. And everything, blows up, and it's just a total mess, and things got delayed, and the actual publishing of all of these papers in a book form didn't actually happen until 1955.
After the war.
Yeah. So the Urantia book was officially published in, I believe, October 1955.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
So that's how we've gotten to
basically
Urantia
just
book.
an interesting side note, and that might be interesting later on, but the same day, same year, same city where the new pope is, that's an interesting coincidence. I don't know, but interesting to point out.
Yes, I didn't catch that. Wow, that's a good one.
Yes, actually, that's a coincidence, but I don't know. Anyways,
Is it?
I don't know. There's a saying in Maya that it's nothing is coincidence or casualidad. You say in Spanish, it's not
no
casualidad.
Such thing as a coincidence. Yeah.
It's causalidad. There's a cause to it. There's not a casualty. It's a cause to it. So that's an interesting take. So anyway, so we have the publication 1955, and there's been a lot of stuff from that point to basically where we're at now. What's the what happened? Because a lot of people are saying, okay, it's a cult, it's a this, it's a that, it's a fucking a bunch of freaks. It's what is it? Who's behind it? What did we do? Who is it that we are?
Yeah, the cult thing, that really grates on me, but I can understand why people would say that because, But I think it's important to remember that 2,000 years ago, Christianity was Paul's cult.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. And look at where it is now. I mean, everything has to start from something, and this is the next dispensational revelation of truth to our planet, and it's going to
Yeah.
take a while for it to sink in.
Yeah.
That's really what it
Definitely.
is. Yeah.
Definitely.
So what's been going on? I think it's important to say that especially post World War II, we live in a very secular and apathetic to a lot of anything spiritual culture, civilization. I think a lot of people came out of the two world wars and all of the other wars that we've been having
Cold
since
War,
then.
everything that happened in the
Yeah.
20th century, definitely.
And they sit there and they go, where is God? You know? And and it's been hard. And so the devastation of the wars has caused a lot of atheism, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but there are reasons. And we can't get into all of that now, unfortunately, but I don't know if the Urantia book has been well received at this point because of that apathy towards real spiritual hungering for truth.
Yeah.
So when it was first published, everyone, like the forum members, they were so excited. It's like, let's light the world on fire, right? Just like the apostles and Paul and everybody, like they went out and they lit the world on fire, and they,
Yeah.
transformed Western society, right? So it's like, let's do it again. And they sent these books out to, copies of the book out to world leaders and religious leaders, to a resounding chorus of crickets. you know but the thing is, in the ensuing years, there have been the truth seekers and the hungry people who have been led to it by our spiritual helpers and stuff, and
Yeah,
word
which
of
is
mouth.
interesting. It wasn't like, okay, here's it came very silently as a whisper.
Yeah.
Let's say it that way.
And that's kind of how I think it's grown over the past 70 years.
Yeah.
I personally am frustrated with that.
I think everybody that reads the book and believes in this revelation is frustrated with that, because you
I
see
agree.
the change in your lifestyle. That's and
Yeah.
it's really practical in the way that you live your life, in the way that the quality of your life with that personal relationship. It's so personal. It's not about, we have to create this structure and dogma and change everybody. No, it's changing you. It's really making you so self-assured in your faith that you want to give that gift to everybody. And it's a pity that many people cannot and are not willing to just a little bit. And but you understand that there might be a time, and that's not for you to do. And that's part of what the book teaches you. You can just lead them to the front of the temple, to the gate, but it's that their choice to come in.
They have to come in. That's right.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's the Melchizedek covenant, right? All you
yeah,
have to do is believe to go in those gates. And Jesus said, well, if you want to stay in there, you have to start exercising some faith. But all you have to do is believe to get in.
yeah.
So
So that's the
important.
situation where we're confronted to this whispering, and here I think we can, we start to come into this history. We start to get
Yeah.
into this story, because
Yeah.
I think in my case, and I think anybody that you talk to who is a UB reader tells you, the book found me, I didn't found it, and the process that you go through, that revelation of God to you, is very important, very personal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It's yeah, it is what it is, unfortunately. So but there are more and more dedicated people with skills and with the zeal to share this message, and I think we're hopefully coming upon a era of second wind in terms of getting this going. So I think we're also sort of at the closing out of a certain era as well. It feels like this post-war era. A lot of people
In
call it
in
PAX.
both Earth history and cosmic history, which I think what we're going to
Yes.
get into
Yeah,
the
we'll
third
be
part,
getting into
because
that too. Yeah.
I think we're everything is converging into one position.
That's right. So this post-World War II Pax Americana sort of thing seems to be disintegrating at an alarming rate.
Mm-hmm.
And what it's doing is it's basically making way for something new, I think.
Definitely,
That's an
definitely.
opinion. But
No, and I agree. That's why
yeah,
you know a lot of people see the situations here. It's if you go and see a birth, you see and you don't do not understand what's gonna about to happen, the life that's
yeah,
gonna be born. You
yeah.
think it's the worst thing that's happening. You know what's happening to this poor woman, but those are the growing pains, and this is what I think is happening to us. We're really coming to realization of that situation, right?
Yeah, yeah. Cool.
Okay, so that we can go and dive a little bit deep into what the book teaches and then what's coming. So maybe we can sum up here in this section, just saying that the after the publication, it's been a below 70 years build up, and one of the things that we believe in or that we concluded in as UB readers, because this isn't a church, this isn't a
No,
hierarchy or anything, as people that read this, is that the first stage was a lot of leaders and teachers, kind of set a basis, and it's worldwide now. And believe it or not, you would amaze yourselves at the amount of important people and that well-renowned people know about the book, are readers, and maybe are not public about it, but that they are. So
that's
it's
right.
been
Yep.
seeded, and now we
Yes.
have this new stage that maybe we can talk about later, but. I mean,
Sure.
just to close the segment, because I think it's been the longest segment in this podcast history. So, what can we close? You were going to get the record for that, Derek. So, what can
Awesome.
we close here in this section, in this segment?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that this is the fifth breath of the light of truth onto our planet. It's a different breath so far because it's not connected to any individuals,
Mm-hmm.
but we'll be talking about it in the next segment, what we think it actually is. But this is a correction. It's a course correction.
Yeah, yeah. It's
And
part of a course correction,
yeah,
I believe. Yeah. What's actually in the book? An emergency gift. Imagine receiving a map of the universe that explains where we came from, why we exist, and where consciousness goes after death. The fifth revelation claims to provide exactly that. It describes a universe populated by millions of inhabited worlds, governed by a vast spiritual administration, and it introduces the idea that every human being carries a fragment of God within them. And it reframes our planetary history, not as the story of a fallen race, but as the story of a world recovering from rebellion. So tell us, Derek, what's in it into this emergency gift that we have?
that's right. So, I think we need to remember this analogy that we've been using when we're talking about the different dispensational bestowals of the light of truth with all of these people that we're talking about, these sons of God, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, the analogy I'm using is blowing up the balloon a little bit
Yeah,
more every time, right?
the stages.
So,
Yeah.
stages, right? Um, So the first one, obviously, we get this very basic presentation of truth. We're obviously still very primitive people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they only share with us a certain level of cosmology, probably that there's inhabited planets in our general area, you
Mm-hmm.
know, that kind of stuff. It would be a local system of planets, maybe. When
Mm-hmm.
Adam and Eve come, they blow up the balloon a little bit more and they talk about how many different systems there might be of planets and how they
Yeah.
coalesce into what's called a constellation, which is another grouping, but it's just another step higher and there's more to understand. So we're blowing out that balloon even more.
Mm-hmm.
That unfortunately was forgotten. So when Machiventa came, he had to reteach everybody that.
Yeah.
So when he was referring to God, he called God the Most High.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the designation that we have for the rulers of a constellation,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
When Jesus came, he skipped over all of the other levels of organization and cosmology, and he taught us about a personal relationship we can directly have straight up to the Universal Father.
So he jumped up from this basic progressive. He really sped up everything for us in a way.
That's right. And that's going to come in and that's going to be a really important part of this discussion, I think. So, and now this fifth breath, I called it, this breath of truth onto the planet, is blowing it up even more to an absolutely extraordinary scale. And I have an actual opinion as to why that is, and I'll tell you about that in a sec. As you mentioned, and I believe this very strongly, this is an emergency intervention. And we talked about the idea that Peter made this mistake at Pentecost and started focusing on who Jesus is more than what Jesus taught. And that created another one of these tangents, right? And then Paul came along and he introduced a lot of Jewish theology based around sin and sacrifice. So now we've got this crisis again, and we got to get things going back towards the norm. So basically, what the information given in this fifth revelation is expansive, blowing up the balloon, and corrective. So it's you can boil it down to those two functions. There's a little bit more, but so what does it correct? Let's talk about what it corrects, and then we'll talk about what it expands. Okay, so we talked about this already. There was no fall of man. The default was a failure of Adam and Eve, our divine parents or administrators at the time. They're divine beings sent to the planet for a very specific purpose, dispensational, a bestowal of truth. It was not us. We did not fall.
Exactly.
And that's a very, very strong
there's no
theme.
original sin.
Yeah.
There is no, we do not come tainted. And this is something that was really liberating afterwards when you realize
Yes.
that it's really, and that you are responsible. And that's one of the contradictions that I always never understood. Why do I have an original sin that I'm not responsible for? And then you're teaching me that I'm responsible for my actions. I don't get it. So
That's
this is oh, okay, now it makes sense. It's these people. And, you know, imagine when you tell a story to a couple of friends, how distorted it gets within a couple of days. Imagine
exactly.
2,000 years, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
More than 2,000
exactly.
years, you know, all this time. Anyway,
Exactly.
so you were saying,
So yeah,
Derek.
so no original sin. The information that we have gives us the full history behind what happened and who, what, why, when, and where. And it helps us understand. And that knowledge is incredibly liberating. And it just gives us a power. It's empowering, right? To have
Yes.
that understanding and to actually to know what really happened, so that we don't have these things
shackles.
foisted upon us. Shackles,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Another correction, there is no, God is unchangeless, right? So this schizophrenic view of God in the Bible between the Old Testament and the New Testament is not a description of the nature of God. It's actually a chronicle of the history of our understanding of the nature of God. It's not
human.
God.
It's
Yes,
human.
God is changeless. Okay, so big difference. So there's before, and that's why it's so significant before Jesus and after Jesus, because it's that distinct of a difference.
Yeah.
So God is not this jealous, wrathful national deity of the Old Testament.
That
God is
that
so
requires
much
a
more.
sacrifice of his own kin in order to suffice. That's, if you look at it, that's very, you know, I was born and raised in Mexico. You look at the pre-Hispanic sacrifices, blood sacrifice, that's more akin to that, to really a loving God, you know? It doesn't make sense.
No,
you know?
absolutely.
All
So big correction there. Another correction is that the Lucifer Rebellion is actually a real thing. It actually happened, and that's why we are so messed up.
And let me, because this is important, and I think it's one of the truths that you get from the UB that really, you know, unshackles you, let's say.
Yep.
You know, a lot of what we, and this is not just Christianity, but, you know, world religions throughout to this point, you know, teaches that there's a balance between good and evil.
Yep.
But really, God and everything encompasses both potential for evil and good, you know, and that's the difference. So there is potential for that. It doesn't need to be actually there. So it's not God that really is fighting against evil and has a balance. You know, it has to sort out his power with the devil. God is beyond that. God is overarching, and
Yeah.
that's why I love Star Wars and the concept of the Force, because it overarches everything. And you do
Yeah.
have the people that wield the dark side and the ones that do wield the bright side, you know, and that's
Yeah.
a balance. But God is that. God is everywhere. But you have this potential for these individuals to do evil, and this is where we're at. So
Yeah.
there's no devil and there's no contention for our souls in that sense, you know, and in the classical sense. But there is this conflict, this rebellion that has consequences, that has brought us to a lot of misguided and evil in the world.
Yes. Yes. I think it's also important to say that in order for you to be able to choose good,
Yeah.
you also have to be able to choose evil.
Yes. Definitely. The
Otherwise,
potential.
there's no choice. There's no choice,
Definitely.
right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these individuals actually are real people. Lucifer's like a real person. Well, no person, but being,
A being. Yeah.
divinely created being. You know, Caligastra, we talked about him. All of these people, Satan, Beelzebub, they're all real individuals that took part in this rebellion, and we remember them through our mythology.
Mm-hmm.
It's survived in our mythology, and you know, after Jesus, you know, all of these ideas of demonic forces and what's it called? Can't
Possessions?
remember. Thank you. Yeah, possessions and all that kind of stuff. After Jesus, like it's all just it's not true. Before Jesus, that kind of stuff actually did happen
Yeah.
because there's a lot more rebels on the planet at that time, but they were
They
all
were
removed.
afforded more
Yeah,
faculties, let's say. They could
yeah,
do some more stuff, that when
yeah,
Jesus came to settle things, they
yeah.
were retired all those leeways, right?
Exactly. And I wrote a paper several years ago that actually um, coincidentally proves all of that they were
Okay.
removed. And it's basically, I'm not going to remember his name now, but it was the high priest at the temple of Delphi, and he was
Okay.
the guy in charge of the Delphic oracle, right?
Okay.
And the oracle was who everybody used to go to
Yeah.
you know, ask questions of the gods and all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. One of the things that I was interested in researching at the time was once the rebels, this is way back in the Lucifer Rebellion time, once all of his rebels had died, the people who had gone over with him, the Anunnaki who had gone over with him, once they had died, how was Caligastia actually able to manipulate and control events on the planet?
Okay.
Because he didn't have actual people around anymore, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how would he do that? And then it hit me. Well, rebel midwayers
Exactly.
acting through
Behind the
oracles.
scenes. Yeah. Yeah.
No, they were actually acting through oracles, right?
Okay.
And so this priest, and I wish I remembered his name, but it's in the article. I can share it with you if you want.
All right.
This is around maybe 100, 200 AD. So this is just, you know, generally speaking, just after Jesus left and
Mm-hmm.
the rebels were removed. They were having a massive crisis in the ancient world because all of the oracles had gone silent and
Really? I
they
did
didn't
not
know
know
what to
this.
do. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's actually recorded. It's a writing called On the Cessation of the Oracles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, I'll share the information with you if you
That's
want to look
interesting
into it
because
more.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
cutting off all this information. And by the way, next segment, and this is just so that you continue watching this. I think next segment I have an opinion. on what happened with the two guys that were left here. But anyway, so
Oh,
let's
I want to hear that. I do. Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
continue.
moving on. So we talked about all the things that have been corrected, and there's a lot more that's been corrected, but those are like some of the really main ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's new though? Like how has our balloon really been blown up? Okay. Now, this goes back to what Jesus taught. Like I was talking before about Jesus skipping over a whole bunch of levels for us, right? And he
Mm-hmm.
came and he taught us about this personal relationship that we can have directly with the universal Father, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he gave us this direct connection and this personal relationship, but he skipped all of the stuff in between.
Mm-hmm.
And what we get in the Urantia papers is all the stuff in between. It fills in that gap and it tells us exactly all of the levels and how it all works. He taught us that the Father is within us, and which is the basis for the idea of the divine fragments that indwell us. They come from the universal Father.
Yeah.
So how can you talk about the divine fragments without describing and explaining where the
And that's the
universal
thing.
Father is, right?
Of course, I mean, if this makes sense, Derek, if you're saying
Yeah,
that Jesus skipped all this in intermediate content just to bring us, because it was an emergency dispensation, then we need to fill that out so that it makes sense, and then
yeah,
things can move forward.
yeah.
Definitely.
And
Okay.
that realization for me really answered a pressing question that I've had for 30 years of reading this book is why have we been given so much information out of step of what we're supposed to be getting? And that answers it. Like we were given this straight direct line to the universal Father and how we can have that. And then now it has to be filled in, how like the in between of all of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
The
So
the point, interesting, because I mean, and we're going to get to into this later, but what we're concluding is that this planet is very special, and I have an analogy, or I have an image, and I think I've shared it before, but the way that I view this is that the universe is a melody, it's a music, and we can talk about it later in the Song of the Ainur and everything, that how
whoa.
everything plays out, everything, but music and the way that music is built, the structures of perfection in time and how everything is. I mean, music, if you analyze it, you have certain faculties that of expression, but it has to be within a certain structure. You can't play within a harmonic part as something that is disharmonic. There's certain notes that you cannot play because that's going to cause dissonance. So as
Yeah.
long as you know that, you have certain creative expression within that. So let's have that context, and everything that's playing out in the universe with a song. So we're part of that song, and let's say that the harmony is being played and we're part of that melody that is being played. So
Yeah.
imagine that song of the universe is being played, and the planet, it's in a record player, remember the old LP record players? Imagine that this planet, I believe, is that needle point, that has to be
Yeah.
really strong, really
Yeah.
tough in order to be able to play that
Yeah.
music of the universe. So let's
Oh,
see that this planet has that special function as the
yeah.
one that is playing the song, because if you look at it, this is where Jesus bestowed. This is where everything is happening. This is where the rebellion was quenched. So this is the certain center stage of all the music of our universe. Anyways, continue, please,
I
Derek. I
like
wanted to
that.
throw
I
that in.
like that.
Yeah.
And the other thing about that is um with all of this in between information that we're talking about is, and it's really hard to wrap your head around, but you get some idea of just how absolutely immense and uncomprehensibly immense God actually is. And I think I was watching one of your earlier episodes with Don Clementine,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he spoke about that, and it really like got me right there. Like he was saying, God is so big in the Urantia book that it actually scared me for a
Yeah.
little while.
He
And
actually
then,
said that he felt
yeah,
ashamed of praying. He
Yes, he
wasn't
did.
worthy
Yeah.
of praying to God.
Yeah,
It's
because
interesting
we're
that.
so small. We're so small. But then he came back, and I think it's important to say this because, like, that's kind of freaky, right? But
Yeah,
he said, that's why Jesus came,
yeah,
because Jesus basically shows us that connection we can have with the
that
Father.
nature of the
Yeah,
Father.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so
So that
beautiful.
that
Yeah,
really, like, that's worth repeating. That was really something that just seriously got me right there. Yeah.
yeah. I think
But
that really got a lot of people. But yeah,
yeah,
it's true.
yeah. So, other things that it has added to our understanding of reality as a whole is, life after death. Okay, well, what does that mean? Do we like become angels and
And
go
play a harp.
play a harp and go to a 1950s nightclub and sip martinis, or like, what do we do, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
it lays this whole ascension career out for us. It's a
Career.
career, and
Let's make that word a stick out. Career.
it's something we do not become perfected beings when we die.
Mm-mm.
What's the point,
Yeah.
right?
We
Um,
the first stage, which is human, we have to learn about so many other things,
that's right. Yeah. So people say, well, why couldn't God just make us perfect? Like, some people ask that. That's a question a lot of people ask. And my answer to that, based on the Urantia book, is, well, God actually already did that. He created a central universe, perfect universe full of perfect beings. He's already done that.
Yeah.
We're not part of that adventure. We're part of a completely different adventure where we are perfected beings, except for the imposition of time,
Mm-hmm.
wherein we can gain experience, which is the only thing that you can add to perfection.
I love that. I love
Perfected.
that.
How can you add to perfection? The only way that you can add to a perfected or a perfectly created being is experience, and that's only something that can be had through time.
Through the imperfection of time, which is what I like
Yeah,
to always say is the
yeah,
potential to the actual. And
yeah,
that's why we have these two poles, the good
yeah,
and evil,
yeah,
and for us to choose. And it's always and that's part of the mechanism, of course, of what we, as in this second stage, as you're saying, of beings that are imperfect going into perfection, that
yeah.
need the dispensation, or the tool of time, where and I love this, and that's why I liked so much, and I worked so much with the Mayans, that they have a formula, and they say time equals art, and that's the basis of their cosmology. Time equals art. So because everything will become art, everything will be perfect. So time will turn everything perfect.
Oh, love it. And that's
Yes.
exactly what it is.
That's.
That's what it
I mean,
is.
we're going to have to talk a lot about that, because it takes it into a very practical pattern that you can
Yeah,
understand, and I call it the wave of time, because as you can understand, how patterns and motions work. It's like waves. How do surfers surf? It's not that they go into the ocean and just they know the patterns. They know how it's going to happen, why, how, when, where, and how to get on top of the wave and not under the wave. And
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
same thing. Is if
yeah.
you understand the patterns of the universe and of life, then you can be on top of the wave, and you can take use of that force, because it's a force basically. You use that force to potentialize and leverage your own force and your own potential. So interesting stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's just, I want to talk about that for the next 40 minutes now.
Oh, of course, of
uh,
course. Well,
but yeah,
that's going to be,
but
a series in
yeah.
itself, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right. So,
So where are we?
basically, based on what we've been saying, it's pretty clear that there is a massive ascension career. I
Yeah.
mean, the question of what do you do with eternity? Eternity is an incredibly long time. Like, you don't just sit there in a heavenly nightclub sipping martinis. There is a career, there is a purpose, there is stuff that we do, and it is all completely laid out.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, yeah, and I'm so excited. Like, it's a terrible thing to say, but I am really, really looking forward to dying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good thing. It takes out the uncertainty and what the hell. I have a good life. I have if I'm here surrounded by loving people, family and everything. I don't want to go over there to a nightclub in heaven and just be sipping martinis. I want to be with my
Yeah,
friends. You will be. There
it's
will be
exciting.
all that. So
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's really
yeah.
comforting as well.
And that's the other thing, is that knowing all of this, like what happens in the afterlife, and it's really laid out in detail, at least the first few stages for us. Like, it really lays it out for us so that you can really dig into it. But you
Yeah.
see that it's not an afterlife. And then I've said that a few times in this series, that I don't see it as an afterlife. It's all one
A
life, right?
continuum. It's a
So
continuum.
so a lot of Urantians actually don't refer to death as passing away or dying. We call it graduation,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's kind of what it really is.
You
Death
you
is
leave
no
this
more than
stage. Yeah.
a means of transcending to the next stage. That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
so that's like a huge thing for us, like, because there's so much fear on this planet, this fear of, especially fear of death and the unknown, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
understanding what death actually is and knowing the unknown part about what comes after, again, incredibly liberating and empowering.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think that kind of gives us what is in there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the Urantia book we can to keep on talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
what it sets straight, about
Yeah.
the dispensation of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
All right,
I agree. Yeah.
perfect. So
So,
and we're gonna close here and ready for
yeah.
the next part, which is really interesting. I'm looking for until the so stay tuned. Now we're gonna talk of what's in it to come. In this segment, what is ours to do? And I'm going to tell a bit of a story that happened to me when I was around 8 years old, 10 years old, around that time. So let me put the basis of what we're going to be talking, and I'll tell you this story. So if this revelation is real, if the book that we are talking about and the source that we have is real, it changes something fundamental. That knowledge always comes with responsibility. Every previous revelation left behind a community with a mission. Machiventa's followers had a mission, the early Christians had a mission, so this question becomes unavoidable. What is the role of those who understand the fifth revelation? And we're not here trying to become, above anybody else or anything. We just have access to this, and anybody can have access to this. And we voluntarily, serve, and we have found that in this transformation that we have lived through, and sharing this really dramatically changes without imposing any religion, any God, or anything of ours into anybody else, but really for individuals to understand their right place in the cosmos and within that relationship with God. So I think that really drives us, and this really sets the stage of what's happening. So before I give it up to you, Derek, I just want to point out a very interesting thing that happened to me when I was in Sunday school when I was about 10 years old. And in Mexico, it wasn't on Sundays. It was actually like on Tuesdays and Thursdays in preparation for your first communion. You would go
Right.
in the
Yeah.
afternoons to your local church, and, all your friends were there and everything. And I remember one day, and they'd set you up in different groups depending on your age and whatnot, and I was with my age group and a little bit older kids. And there was one day, one of the afternoons, that was really dark, it was really, really pitch dark. Something was happening, a storm. And one of the guys said, "Oh, maybe it's the 3 days of darkness." And I'm like, "What? What 3 days of darkness? What are you talking about?" Well, it says here in this book, in the last book, and since we're in Sunday school, that was the topic, called
Yeah.
Revelations, and what's going to happen. And this is the fight between good and evil and the devil, and that really blew my mind, and that really made me realize that what I was understanding, or what was there in this, what I was going to Sunday school, wasn't just history, that there was future things and future events to come. And from that moment on, I really had like a longing and a desire and something to be part of this celestial battle that was on hand, going to happen as described in Revelations. But, I was 8, 10 years old, but back then. Now that I'm older, I see that there is something happening. There is a transformation, not an end of the world, of course, but a situation where everything is changing in the way that we conceive and perceive God. And all these conversations that we've had really teaches us that this is part of what it's all about. It's an evolution and in the understanding of God and of us as human beings. So
Yeah.
tell us what you think of what's to come, Derek, and why do we have this book, and why is the world going through all this situation?
Um, I think, as I said when we were talking about Jesus, his bestowal was really a turning point for us, and everything revolves around this Lucifer rebellion, because that's where all of the darkness and confusion for us started, right? It
Mm-hmm.
just totally took us off the natural course of what's supposed to happen on a normal evolutionary world. And Jesus has started putting us back on this new course. So it's only 2,000 years ago
Mm-hmm.
that this rebellion has finally been finished, closed,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Officially ended. And like that's such a long time. Like it's so hard to wrap your head
Yeah,
around,
we're
right?
it's
So
we're
it's
picking the pieces at
200,000
least. Yeah,
years. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
200,000 years. And everyone's like, why is it taking so long? Like, can't God just go like that or whatever? But, um, there's half of paper in the Urantia book that talks about why they have let things go the way they have.
yeah.
And out of all of them, I think the one that I'll just say right now, the one I'll say right now is that we are talking divine lengths of time,
Yeah.
right? So Lucifer himself is billions of years old. Jesus, who we know as Michael, he's definitely even older, but I'm like he's definitely, well, he's from paradise, which is why I'm kind of stumbling on that. He
Yeah,
comes
he is
directly
eternal.
from so I don't know if he's actually eternal. I think there's an actual time when he was created,
Okay.
but he hails from paradise. So but I mean we're talking billions and trillions of years old,
Yeah, the
right?
concept of time in
So
there is different. Yeah,
yeah. So I the point that I'm making is what's 200,000 years to them?
yeah. Or
Right.
2,000 years for that much.
2000, yeah. So I actually did the math, and I'm going to get it wrong, but if like time is relative as well, right? So
Yeah.
time on Earth, even compared to time on Mars, is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
When you think of years, right? Like we measure
Mm-hmm.
a year by how long it takes our planet to go around the sun. Well,
Mm-hmm.
obviously every other planet takes a different amount of time, and so time wherever you are in the universe is
Yeah.
reckoned completely differently.
Yeah.
And so where Jesus's seat is, where Michael's headquarters is, their time is reckoned basically four-ish of our years is 1 year of his time. So since his bestowal here, it's only been like 340, 350 of his years.
Yeah, it's really
So
relative. It's really small compared. Yeah.
right. So I think for most people who read the Urantia book and understand the rebellion and understand that the Urantia book says that in conjunction with the publishing of the Urantia book, the first hearings of this tribunal against Lucifer has started.
Mm-hmm.
So then and we're speculating here now because speculating's awesome and it's fun, especially with information like this. But the speculation is, well, okay, so they started the hearing well, usually they measure years by about 1934 from the Urantia book. So in and around 1934, they've started these hearings. How long is that going to take? Because what everybody wants to know is, when is the rebellion going to be finally adjudicated so that our quarantine is lifted?
I have an opinion on that.
And I want to hear it. Yeah, because everyone's got opinions on that, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love
I
to
think
hear
that's
people's. Yeah,
I think that's something that's been in everybody's mind, and
yeah,
I have this opinion, and especially what I've seen personally, and what the development, especially the speeding up of recent events, I'm not gonna get into the planet events, because we've all seen, economic, militarily, we've seen the pandemic, we've seen all this situation that we have, But I've seen a quickening, and I've seen a redirection of, before a lot of people, what a lot of people weren't really sharing, or was within circles. But now I see, a great longing, maybe if we can go back into maybe what the apostles felt in Pentecost, like that drive and that longing. I see a change within the community where everybody wants to share. And this is a consequence, this program and a lot of what we're doing, this podcast is of that. But I felt something, and I really, I can even say there was a meaning here. I don't know how high I went, but something happened during the time when the sea change in the Vatican happened, where I believe that this is what I feel, and like I said, this disclaimer is my personal opinion, nothing, but I believe that adjudication came, and that not only these guys were adjudicated, but the remnants of the people that were here, the guys that were here, the two guys that were missing, Catlegacia and Delegacia, were apprehended, and they were taken. And that's why there was such a big shift. So now we don't have those influences, and now we are, let's say, ridden of that situation, where everything is now will not have that influence. So I see, and this is just speculation, and I see that
yeah,
change. And you see when it happened, right at the Sunday of Easter Sunday is when Pope Francis died, and then the time it had, that I see that period between his death and the naming of the new Pope, there was something. There wasn't not only a cardinal conclave, but a celestial conclave of what's happening. And if we said this is the pivotal point, where the center stage in our history, where things are decided and taking, moving forward, this is the place where they decide that. So at the same time that this was being adjudicated, or these guys were putting out, new plans were being drawn, and new things is like, okay, so what do we have? Where are we at? What's moving forward? And you can
yeah.
see after the naming of the new Pope, boom, a lot of the things, and not only with us, the UB community, a lot of the things that are happening in the world was happening politically, geopolitically. Suddenly everything, everything was in potential. Oh, let's attack here. Let's, everything was, what happens if we do something? Suddenly, boom, there was suddenly a catalyst, and I'm not gonna argue in favor or against, but we needed something to catalyze, a
Yeah,
catalyst to
yeah,
set everything in motion. So I
yeah,
see that. And just to close that information with this, there was a special visitor that we had, and just kind of made a round here, Three Eye Atlas. And I know that all
right.
my UFO folks are going to be anxious to hear this part. But I see that this maybe, I kind of think of, how do you sever connections with the celestial higher ups? Is there, something physical that comes in, and you see the way that this all happened. And I think, and this is my opinion, would have this been something like a drone or something, where they sense from outer space to start getting all the connections back, and start, putting the wires back, putting the circuits back? I don't know. Maybe this is just going beyond, but I see that, all the things at this point, and how it sped up and how it went, and it was going to come pass by us. And if the sun is the center of our gravity, and everything is being pulled by the sun, then I kind of put two and two together there, and it had something more to do with what's happening. But anyways, that's just my speculation.
I'm going to add something to this,
All right, all right.
because what you're saying is really interesting, and it's a convergence of sort of events that you're kind of talking about. So that's why I want to add something. So um, the Urantia book talks about different types of resurrections,
Yeah,
and the big ones, especially the big ones, usually accompany the transition of one dispensation to another. And a dispensation is usually marked by the arrival of a new Son of God, right? So you've got the Planetary Prince come, and then when Adam and Eve come, there's a dispensational resurrection where everybody is resurrected, right? There's other kinds of resurrections as well. So depending on how spiritually advanced you are, if you have spiritually advanced to the point where you have a personal seraphic guardian, and there's more to it than that, but you can, in the same way that Jesus did, die and resurrect on the third day or third period, right?
Okay.
So that would be a more direct resurrection, right? There are also special resurrections that are decided way above our pay grade, that, but they're special. So, so for example, when Adam and Eve died, that was about 500 or 600 years after they arrived. There was a special resurrection for just the people involved in all of those events, and they were resurrected. So that's special. So that doesn't happen too often. But the one that I want to add here now is there are also millennial resurrections.
Okay.
Every 1,000 years. And those, I think, were disrupted by the Lucifer Rebellion.
Okay.
But now that that's all been stopped, like Jesus came and he ended that, right? A whole bunch of things started up, and we're told that direct resurrections started up again.
Yeah. You don't have to wait for these
dispensational resurrections, right?
Resurrections, yeah.
Right. So now that these millennial resurrections are going again, if you count back to the last dispensational resurrection was basically 30 AD, right? Because that's when we're told that's when the last dispensational. So you take that, and so a millennial resurrection would have happened in 1030, and then the next one is going to happen in 2030. So now we're talking, well, around these times, and I've actually done a little bit of research, but it's not publishable and super shareable yet, but I've taken this idea and I've been sort of researching, well, what kind of things happened after 10,030, not 10,000, 1030 AD, that might signify some sort of spiritual cleansing or something like that, of energies or whatever. And there was actually a lot of things that really shifted, like that was the beginning of the shift out of the Dark Ages, in the 100, 200, 300 years after that. Really started shifting out of that, and then the universities started. We have Gothic architecture. It was
the turning point of this situation. And that's where we are.
So I'm sort of thinking, well, it's like it didn't all start exactly there, but if a resurrection is able to somehow, and I'm just spitballing here, obviously, cleanse sort of spiritual energies that have been hanging around for 1,000 years that were pretty dark, Dark Ages and all of the conflicts and, all that kind of stuff. If those are removed and there's a lightening, and then some, it makes room for a quickening of progress or something like that, right? So that's kind of what I was looking for. So now I'm thinking, well, especially with what you've just said, what could happen after 2030 if there's a millennial resurrection then? And, the adjudication has taken place. They're starting to reconnect everything. And then all of this really heavy sort of energy over the past 1,000 years is removed as well. And then we, I
and the
think
changes that are happening, by the way, that we don't know how this year is going to end,
No.
and the geopolitical changes in the practical world that we live in the material world secular world that we live in, are changing as well. So we're not just talking about cosmic; everything is changing.
No. This is absolute planetary. Like we're talking the shifting and reshaping of civilization and the evolution and eventual perfection of
Yes.
civilization, right? So
Yes.
obviously we've been for the post-war period, we've been in this really crystallized structural, world order that's sort
Like you
of
said, Pax
disintegrating.
Americana, which I
Yes,
like
that's what it
that
is.
expression.
Yeah, that's
It's and
the
it
term.
becomes a mirage if
Yeah,
it's not, and that's why this is all breaking. Why that mirage
yeah,
that it's all breaking, definitely.
yeah. And within these periods of intense change and struggle is when the new stuff can arise, like you were saying before.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not when everything's solidified and just solid. It's in the periods of intense change and struggle, and hopefully not, but conflict, um, that all of these new opportunities and potentials start arising.
yeah,
So
definitely.
um, we are in a period of intense change and intense potential, and I'm just really wondering what's gonna happen, even in the next 10 years, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
No, in the next
yeah,
5 years, and we have now the technology. We have right now the convergence of so many things, and if something these series have taught us, Derek, is that we're much more than the actual history that we know of. We are much more than the actual interactions that we have in this planet. The cosmic interactions. And we're much more than the simple personal or familial consequences that we have. We have fundamental consequences that are part of the existence of God the Supreme. We are being co-creators with Him and with the rest of the universe and the unfoldment of this universe. So that really puts us in a very important situation. And once you look at it and you see the situation and you see all the chaos that we're going in, like you're saying, nothing comes out of a stable or status quo. It comes out of all the chaos. So it's exciting times, and I see that what we're doing and what's happening, not only with and not to take in and say, okay, we have we have the only truth, because truth is for everybody. Truth is not owned by anybody. It's owned. It's universal. It's God.
yeah,
So if through us you can get to that universal truth, may it be it so. If there are many other paths that you can get to that truth, take them, please. Our here our invite or our invitation and our yes, what we assure or guarantee you is that if you go into this personal quest where you find your vocation and you start to find your place and understand that relationship that you have with God, everything in your life will become better, and life is going to happen regardless. It's just the way that you live it, right?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So I guess another thing that comes into this, and something that's been hiding behind what we've been talking about, what we've been framing the Urantia book as.
Hmm.
We've been framing it as an emergency revelation, right?
Hmm.
To get us to change our trajectory back. But if you look back at the only other example that we have of an emergency bestowal is Melchizedek, right? And what did he
Yeah,
come here to do? He came to reignite the light of truth, which you could make a parallel
yeah,
with
yeah,
us. Um, but he also came to prepare the way for what's coming next.
yeah, yeah,
And that is another thing that a lot of Urantia book readers speculate about, is what's next.
yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot there, because um, we could have a situation where Adam and Eve come back. I'm not sure if that would happen, but many of his children are being held in reserve, and nobody knows why, on the constellation headquarters planet. So what are they doing there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, and Machiventa Melchizedek is now our vice regent planetary prince.
yeah.
Um, what is the next bestowal for us, because we're so out of order, right? So
Yeah, we're so special in that
yeah,
chronology that we can't really, based on other experiences.
yeah,
And this is interesting. I just want to add to that, Derek, that there is in fact the promise, because there is a personal connection to this planet of Jesus of coming back. So that is not ruled out as well. We're not
That's
saying
right.
that he's going
He's
to come and
promised to
appear
come back.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So,
Yeah.
so those are all promises and those are all potentials, basically.
Yeah. So basically what we're saying is there's no way to tell what's coming next. but
and
prepare.
how we can exactly let's
Yeah.
I like that term, you know, prepare, the end is coming, which is not.
Yeah.
Which
We
is
got to
not.
get our cardboard signs out.
Yeah, well, we
Yeah.
have to have our bells. But no, I think that if anything, we have to take out of this, you know, understanding the history, understanding the future, is we're in a pivotal moment,
Yeah.
not only in the story of our planet, but in the story of our universe. And once we dimension what this planet, you know, the importance of this planet and what happens here, and also what we do here, everything that we do here as individuals, you know, because of the situation that we're at, really is recorded and really is regarded as, you know, what's really going to be eternal. So any
Yeah.
small victory, anything that you do here towards that ideal of becoming one with God, personal relationship with God, is really regarded as very high, given the circumstances where we are. So remember that. I mean, there's a lot of info. By the way, we don't have the exact dates and everything, but Derek will be accompanying us into our new platform that we are setting up in school. We're now going to have a complimentary platform where everything that you hear here, or the guests that are here, we're going to invite them over, where you can have a personal one-on-one interaction with them, and we can explain more of what is here. I know that you guys have a lot of questions. I mean, of course, who doesn't, you know? And the idea is here to explain that. You know, there's a lot of information, a lot of people from our community also going to be there, that all can also, you know, point you out and different share with you, but not teach you, but really share their experiences, where you can really understand and you know, find by yourself, you know, all the resources, because this is personal. Like we said, we're here to give you the personal tools for you to have this personal relationship with God.
That's right.
So Derek, before we leave, anything that you want to put up into this? I mean, we can keep on the speculation later on when we have you there.
I think the purpose of this final segment of us speculating like this is to show two things. One, that we don't have all the answers. There is a lot of expansive information in the Urantia book, but a lot of it is the old idea of, you've got lots of answers, but now you have even more questions, right? And the way that the information in the book is presented in a way that creates more curiosity in you. You want to look into these things more. You want to learn more. It ignites the hunger in you for truth even more than you had when you first dive into the book, right?
You understand that there's so many other things there that you can find information about, that
That's
you
right.
just want to go there, right?
That's right. And the other thing that we'll point out and maybe land on is that even the people who are writing these papers, the beings that are gifting us this information and writing the papers that are in the book, tell us that sometimes they're speculating too, because they don't have all the answers.
It's not in their jurisdiction or you know, and what they can do. Yeah.
The only level that you can actually have all the answers at is God, the universal Father, right at the top. Anything below that is just, it's sub-absolute. It's not complete. And all of the beings that function on these lower levels, they come to a point where they have to speculate as well. And there's a lot of places in the Urantia book where they will sit us down and say, this is the information. This is what you need to know. This is sort of where we think it might be going, but we got to tell you, we're not sure either. We're speculating. And I think that is awesome.
Because it makes you part of it, you know. They're not put above you, you know. They're brothers in that sense, you know. We have the same questions, and you guys are working on your stuff. We're working on our stuff, and together we're working in this universe.
That's right. And it really, really goes a long way towards 2,000 years down the road, not having something like the Urantia book deified like the Bible is.
Yeah. Definitely. That's
Yeah.
something that we do not believe should happen. And
No.
it's a tool for the teachings and the philosophy of the Brotherhood of God and the Fatherhood of Man.
That's all it is.
The Fatherhood of God and the Brotherhood of Man, sorry. And that's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that simple. And if
Yeah.
that becomes law and that becomes, the end in itself, it's not. That's just a tool. The end in
Yeah.
itself is that
Yeah.
relationship with God.
It's a manual. It's a manual.
It's a manual, exactly.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
worship a manual.
No.
You can give it credit, but
Yeah.
it's the information that is in there that's really important.
Yeah.
Awesome, Derek. So I think we can close the series here. I'm really excited, and this starts a new chapter in what we're going to be doing. Going and doing the conversations and expanding into other topics. But it's been really wonderful. I really enjoyed it. I think not only me, but to a lot of UB readers as well. You brought a lot of light and a lot of conclusions that we hadn't reached before that were really, really good to us. So I really give you thanks for enlightening me a lot. You did a great job.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real education, and I really enjoyed it. It's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, brother.
Thank you.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
And thanks to all that were here. Remember to like, subscribe, share, comment with people about this they might like and find interest in this. So till next time, I'm Santiago Kneeland. Take care and carpe diem. On the Divine Within podcast, we'll share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.